Welcome to Garden-Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today I would love to do a video showing you the difference between ground cherries and Peruvian golden berries. Now the fruit is somewhat similar, but they are different plants and they're both delicious, and I will show you what they look like. So we're here in my front yard along the south side, and I have a bunch of volunteer ground cherries from last year and then one that I actually planted because I wasn't sure if I'd get the volunteers. And we have tons of volunteers. So here's a volunteer. And you can see all the ground cherries on the ground, and I'll show you what they look like in just a minute. But when they are ripe, they fall off the bush. This one I think is a Miss Molly, but anyway, they fall off the bush and then you just pick them up off the ground and they're ready to eat. And we have several over here. These were somewhat limited in size, I think, by the amount of water they were getting. They weren't getting as much as they could have. But they need full sun, they need a good deal of water, and some fertile soil. That might be the other issue over here. The soil over here might not be as fertile as the other area that I have them. But anyway, these are volunteers. Now the volunteers aren't too bad. They're easy to pull out once they get some size on them. But each one of these fallen ground cherries will actually produce several plants. Now this is still my front yard. And this is all one ground cherry. Let me walk you around and show you. So this is one that I planted on purpose. It's right here by my sitting area in the front. And this is one half of it. If we walk around, here's the other half. So you can see that they are quite large. This is probably, let me see, probably about 6 feet wide and 4 feet. Yeah, 6 feet by 4 feet. So they can get pretty large. Let me show you a couple of other volunteer ones. Here's another volunteer ground cherry that died because I accidentally pulled it up a little bit, broke the roots on it. But you can see the sheer amount of fruit that this produces. Look at that. All of those are ground cherries and they're all ripe. This I'm going to need to be very careful cleaning up to make sure I don't get huge amounts of volunteers next year. But they're delicious and they're really, really good dried. So let me show you what a ground cherry looks like. Now I pulled a few of them off the ground just to show you the difference. So these are what the ground cherries look like. They're in these little paper husks, and then when you pull the husk back, it's kind of like a tomatillo. You have these beautiful little orange ground cherries. And they are so good. Now you do have to be careful because sometimes the husk can be brown like this, but the ground cherry is a little green. Now, when it's this color, it's not bad, but if they're actually green, then they are poisonous. This one just doesn't taste very good. And here's what they look like when they're green. This husk is green, but sometimes you can actually get the ground cherries in the brown husk that are green. So eat the beautiful orange ones. They are seriously one of my favorite snacks. Now when they're dried, they taste a lot like sorbet, just like a pineapple sorbet. They're very sweet and they have a lot of seeds. Let me see if I can show you the insides of one of them. And I don't know if you can see the inside and see how many seeds there are. Now the seeds are definitely, they're not hard. They don't have a flavor and they're not unpleasant to eat. So now when you dry them, the seeds are a little bit more pronounced, but they're still absolutely delicious. So that is the ground cherry. This variety that I've grown is pineapple ground cherry or Miss Molly. Now let me show you another plant that I have that's a ground cherry, and it's the Peruvian ground cherry or golden berry. So let's show you what those look like. Now most of my ground cherries are in the front yard, and this right here is a Peruvian ground cherry. It's more upright. This one's about 3 feet tall, but if it was standing straight up, it would be 4 or 5 feet tall. It's quite wide, so it's a good sized sprawling plant. I think they're pretty attractive. They stay green like this. And then they have these pretty little yellow flowers like the tomatillo. Look how pretty that is. There we go, it's focused now. And then the flowers form these husks just like the ground cherries, but they're larger. And there's quite a few of them down here. Now the issue that I've had with these ground cherries, with the Peruvian ground cherries, is that they are late to ripen. So now I planted these Peruvian ground cherries the same time that I planted the regular ground cherries. And this is the third ripe one that I've had. So they turn, it looks a little bit green in my screen here, but this is brown. And then when you open it up, the ground cherry is a lot bigger. They're a little bit citrusy and kind of have a I'd say papaya mango taste. Now, because of the papaya overtones, which is not one of my favorite flavors, it took me a while to kind of warm up to these plants. But after a while of eating them, they've become quite addictive. Last year I produced enough to make I think it was 12 jars of salsa, and it was delicious, delicious salsa. So these are really good. I have not tried these dried yet. But I'm sure they would dry really well. So you can kind of see that it has the same seedy look inside. And a fantastic flavor. Now, as I said, the differences are, number one, they ripen later. My plants this year had severe spider mites when they were younger, and we had a very cold spring, so they got put in the ground later and they struggled for about 2 months. They didn't start really actually growing until the end of August, didn't start flowering until September. And so now, just barely mid-October, we're getting our first harvest. And I've had three ground cherries off of those, off 3 plants. And we have a frost coming next week, so I probably am not going to be able to harvest much more. So for that reason, they are a little borderline in my area. My normal mid-frost date is mid-October, and if these are going to ripen this late, then we're really not going to be able to have that many harvests. But I think they are actually worth it. If you can get a good year like last year, where you can get a good harvest, get them in the ground early enough, have a warm spring, have them mature before your first frost date, they are absolutely amazing. So those are the 2 types of ground cherries that I'm growing on my property. And I would love to hear if you've grown them in your area and how easy they are to grow for you and what you like to make with them. And if my videos are helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share them with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.